Well, how do animal rights campaigns affect life in rural America? Well, in this week's Champions of Rural America, we take you to Capitol Hill, where the Western Caucus Foundation hosted a panel discussion called Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. The conservation focused on the growing impact of animal rights groups on farmers, ranchers, and outdoor lifestyles. Chairman Doug LaMalfa opened the panel by asking Ryan Bronson with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation about the consequences when wolves and grizzlies lose their natural fear of people.
Not having any sense of fear of repercussions of getting that meal from a cow, or taking in northern Minnesota, taking a dog off of the front yard. Wolves are certainly preying on pets in places where those populations are high, in Wisconsin, places where there's lots of wolves. That is absolutely happening.
Well, Chairman LaMalfa then discussed introduction of wolves and other animals into new habitat where they may interface with humans, talking with Taylor Schmitz, Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus Foundation.
I also think, from a human safety standpoint, obviously having, more wolves, grizzly bears, and mountain lions on the landscape that are left unchecked is a human safety standpoint. But I also think from just being able to generally enjoy your outdoor experience, people go to see wildlife. They go to see elk. They go to see pronghorn, whatever that may be. And if there are significant impacts on wildlife as a result of predators, that's less of an opportunity for people to enjoy the outdoors, and they might not get out there and enjoy these things, and you can change their mind of how they look at the world. So I think it's, we all go to the national parks and carry our bear spray around, right? We're all on edge. Well, these bears are used to seeing people every single day. In the case of other places in the country, Bob Marshall Wilderness and the Congressman Downington State, these bears have not seen people in many cases. And if left unchecked, it's going to be a continued problem for sportsmen, for general outdoor recreationalists, for landowners, for ranchers, et cetera.
Well, to wrap things up, Representative Dan Newhouse asked the panel what Congress should be focused on.
In the directions that we could be helpful here in the halls of Congress, is there anything more that we should be focused on? Educate us and the audience of where we should be putting our attention.
I think one of the biggest things you all could do, and everyone here could help, is there's a Working Animals Protection Act that's been introduced in several states, and it protects the use of raising livestock, which is what they are. They're livestock. Horses, bulls, cattle are not pets. They're livestock. But that is probably the best thing I can see right now. It protects the use of being able to make a living out of that. Probably one of the things you all are going to see here in Congress in the next year or two is something to do with the Horse Protection Act, because the USDA and APHIS last year way overstepped in all of the equine industry's opinion. And it luckily got stopped, and they just last week went back to the original, at least until 2026.
One of the first steps with some of the species we talked about today, wolves and grizzly bears in areas where they've recovered, let's get them delisted. Wolves should be delisted in the entire lower 48. Wolves are recovered. They are not in danger of extinction, and states are perfectly capable of managing them. But giving them the ability to manage them is a good first step. Federal protections under the Endangered Species Act is the lowest bar that animal rights groups seek, and that's why they're so engaged in that. So I think that's a first step that Congress can be engaged in. I think one of the things related to these special interest groups that are so active on these issues is defunding them, and that includes the federal grants that they receive, but also the fact that they file lawsuits against federal agencies often and then are awarded attorney's fees under the Equal Access to Justice Act. That's silly that a major organization like Defenders of Wildlife or the Sierra Club or any of these groups that are much larger in funding than the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and would be significantly sized businesses if they weren't nonprofits, are able to collect attorney's fees at $400 an hour for these for the litigation that they engage in that's frivolous. I think that's silly.
For Congress just continue focusing on upholding state wildlife management authority. Ryan mentioned that these groups want to see wildlife become under federal control. And the more that we slowly chip away and allow that to happen, the worse it's going to be for sportsmen and women, for landowners, for ranchers, et cetera. So those are all things that I certainly think that we need to be mindful of, diligent up here. Any bill that mentions wildlife, we really need to take a hard look at it and say, what are the unintended consequences of this, and how is this going to impact wildlife management into the future?
Well, we thank the Western Caucus Foundation for partnering with us on that, and of course, is Champions of Rural America. Thank you again for that.